Hallo,
Hallo,
welcome to Film Explorer
Filmexplorer,
podcast.
Fabrica, 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 Fabrica.
Hello and welcome from the Film Explorers live podcast Fabrica at Bildrausch Film Festival in Basel. We are sending directly from the beautiful piazza near Stadtkino. I am Jeannette Wolf. This year's edition, started on Wednesday, has its main topic, Hello Neighbor, which means exploring living together in all its facets. For today's talk, Film Explorer chose the film The Stimming Pool, made by the Neuroculture Collective, and Stephen Eastwood, who is present here with us. Hello.
Hello, nice to be here.
Stephen, you are a visual artist and filmmaker. You hold a degree in fine art from Plymouth University, a PhD from University College London, Slade School of Fine Art, and you are currently professor of film practice at Queen Mary University of London. So let me give a short summary of the film. Radically subjective and original, the film explores other forms of perception, communication, and presence. It immerses us in alternative realities that challenge our usual notions of normality. The protagonists are autistic artists who bring their own forms of expression, interests, and perceptions to the cinematic narrative. In several interwoven chapters, a kaleidoscopic college of portraits of neurodiverse realities emerges. The film questions how perception works beyond neurotypical norms and invites us to see the world from a new, fluid perspective. Around the table here, I welcome Öykü Sofuoglu, journalist and film critic, and Noémie Baume, film critic. So we are happy to have you here to discuss the film.
My first question would be, how did you first met this 6 person who participate to the creative process, and how did it work, this making of a film as a collective?
We were very fortunate to get some funding from an organisation in the UK called the Welcome Trust, and in our application to them, we said that we felt that the kind of conventions of moving image culture, of cinema culture, assume a certain neuronormative subject, and maybe the way that the cinema describes the human and assumes what it's like to be in the world is very reductive. So we said we wanted to run workshops and invite people from the autistic community to come to workshops to collectively think about how can we change the form of cinema to be more representative of other ways of being in the world. So we ran loads of really fun workshops. We did workshops where we took the 7.1 mix from films like Mad Max, and people could live remix them to their own comfort and get rid of the noise. We did lots of work thinking about backgrounds, like what is it in the entire screen? Why do we always fixate on intentional subjects and faces? And, just designed to think about how we could do film differently. And then out of those workshops, 5 artists emerged that wanted to keep going with the project and co-create, and that they became the Neuroculture Collective. They hadn't met before. They're all artists. I wish they could be here. Sam, Georgia, Robin, Lucy, and Ben. So they kind of formed like a band in a way. And then there was a long development process in how we kind of brought those ideas to the screen.
So how long did it last altogether, from the first workshop and to the film?
It was definitely affected by COVID because we had to do remote kind of ideas development. But I would say it was about 3 years from first meeting to shooting, and then 4 years from first meeting to releasing the film. But that period, I mean, we were very fortunate to have funding to keep together through that delayed process. And it meant that we really built trust and a common language. And I think often in trying to do these kinds of films, you don't have enough time together. But we had a lot of time together and really developed a method that worked for us, slow listening. Sometimes we'd have creative meetings where nobody spoke, really just learning to be together. how we would form decisions, who would take on which role. We just really learned how to create together.
There's a scene in the film where we see like people gathered around the table and discussing about the filmmaking process. So is it like a fictional depiction of what you are going to, or is it more like a document? It has a documentary value. This is my first question.
It's a good question. This film was played almost entirely at documentary film festivals, but I don't know if we within the project really think of it as a documentary. We think of it as an art film that kind of mixes documentary and fiction. So there are some scenes in the film, like the early scenes with Robin and his dad, John, where I would say that's more or less an observed documentary image. But that collective scene is an approximation of what it was like for us to work together, but we were in a staged environment, if you were.
And I think it's interesting when you consider the terminology of masking and how fiction itself or documentary itself is a form of masking, because even if you depict reality in a documentary form, you kind of the individuals being filmed would always kind of mask their own real selves, which it doesn't actually exist. So there's, I think, this layer of interesting interplay between fiction and documentary that can also be traced within the thematic of the film.
I don't think we were setting out to do something observational, and we weren't really. I think very early on, we all discussed how extractive documentary can be and how films can require people to essentialize their experience and perform their experience. So I think we wanted to do something much more free than that, and not sort of fall within those bounds. But yes, I think that anybody that is on camera or is the subject of a film has to reframe themselves and think through that frame. And it's not like it's an objective frame. I think that we played into that in a way. And it's interesting to talk about masking, because one of the collective, Georgia, actually wrote a manifesto for the camera, which we think of as an extra character in the film. So she wrote a manifesto for what she described as the autistic camera. And so if your listeners get to see the Stimming Pool, the film opens as though it's an observational documentary, a character documentary with a father and son at home chatting, and you think it's going to be a sort of portrait character film. And Georgia said that we planned that to be a trick opening, where the film is masking as a standard documentary before it learns to kind of drift away from that and do something different. So the film is playing with your expectations, hopefully.
It's an interesting. And was there also like a performative aspects of some scenes were a concern of you? Because you, like, there's a deconstruction of the cinematic form, that's obvious, but that can be interpreted as like I'm talking from a standpoint of a general audience. Oh, this is an art film. This is like a performance. Why is it playing in cinema? Did you guys have like conversations about the potential feedback about the audience, or like categorizations of potential categorizations, let's say?
I mean, it's so process driven, this film. It's so much about coming together to think about what we as a collaboration wanted to see on the screen. It sounds very privileged to say that we weren't overly concerned by audience, but that is true. I think it was driven by what we wanted to do with the form and what everybody in the collective wanted to see realized within their arts practice on the screen. But I think we thought that audiences would follow, and certainly audiences have followed. We get really good responses generally from screenings, whether you identify as neurodivergent, autistic or not. In terms of, I think it is a very experimental film, but I think people feel rewarded, we hope, from being trusted to be able to cope with something that's not that managed. You don't really get a meaning system from the film. You don't get a story. And so it can be a bit bewildering, I think, the first half, but hopefully by the second half you've learned to just flow with it, and then it's quite fun.
And how did you kind of all work all together to construct the final narrative with this mandrake symbolic? How did it came out? And
so we used a visual collaboration platform called Mural. So one of the things that was decided on really by the collective early on was that translating creativity and ideas that you want to see on the screen into words and a script is an unnecessary kind of drag on the creative process. So we didn't have a script. We had a purely visual schematic, and we used this visual collaboration software where anybody can log in and you can put pictures, GIFs, sound files, and you can make connective tissue. It looked like a kind of the root system of a tree. And that's how we shaped it. And some people had very specific things. Like Robin wanted to make a zombie film. Like he's got a whole epic story of that character in the Louisiana swamps, to bewilder your listeners. But there is a 2-minute animated horror zombie sequence in the film. We couldn't do more than that. So part of the co-creation process was to find framing ideas around what he wanted to see on the screen. So we made it a lost film, and we put the posters for that film in the background of other scenes. Similarly, Lucy had this character of this kind of human dog avatar that can travel by the wind through time and sort of looks over people with disabilities. And there was a very long narrative that she had come up with, but we used that character as a kind of glue and connective tissue. So some people had really specific ideas, and some people had, I think, for example, Ben and Georgia within the collective were much more interested in themes of belonging, themes of repressing your body, repressing stimming, wanting to find a community where you could move freely, feeling tested by society. So that was more like we could shape scenes around those themes and making sure we did justice to the certain scenes that people really wanted to see.
You mentioned the autistic camera, and I was curious if there's this thing we can call as autistic screen viewing experience, because I feel like there are moments when we see people watching films or images. Either it's on the screen where we see the dots. I can't remember her name, but I think it's Sam watching the screen and images, and at some point she's like, "Can I change it?" Like this kind of intention or like a willpower to change the images, or the audience watching Robin's film. So there's this potential idea of what autistic audience want to see on screen. And was it something you discussed? I don't know, maybe it's too vague, but I feel like if there's a camera that can be autistic, there's also an audience, a counterpoint of that, the audience. How did you think about the audience, let's say?
I think we had to tread a very interesting tightrope with how we made the film, in that nobody wanted to generalize what autistic experience is, and nobody wanted to fall into the trap of this trying to represent autistic experience, which is always individual, diverse, different. And too often I think films about autism are sort of obliged or compelled to explain or illustrate or inform about what autistic experience is. So I don't think anybody in the collective felt a big driver to use the film to do that. But I think they wanted to bring in autistic sensibility into how the film was made and how the film used form. And then I think we just trusted the audience to sort of resonate with that. And, you know, we've had audiences, like autistic people in the audience say, I felt very empowered and I felt very seen by the film. But we've also had non-autistic people in the audience say, I'm not autistic, but I know that I mask, and I know that I disguise how I'm feeling around others, and I identify with the film on that level. So I don't know. I mean, I think there are lots of initiatives that are interesting, like relaxed screenings, where you take some of the pressure and the control out of screening environments. You turn the lights on, you encourage people to be able to move around in their seats. And I think we wanted the film to kind of mimic that. The film has like intense spaces and quiet spaces. It's kind of encouraging you to move and not feel that you have to sit still. So I think that's one of the things we wanted to try to translate into the cinema space.
I'm curious if you also have like a future projects that you're planning to do, or what's next for you if you're planning to collaborate with this collective?
So the collective is often asked, what are you going to do next? And I think it's a really difficult question for everybody within the collective to answer, because in many ways the collective kind of was invented for this project, and it may be that it only exists for this project. At the moment, the collective is meeting monthly to just have like talk to each other about art practice. And everybody within the collective has new projects. Some are film-based, some aren't, and some people within the collective are collaborating. But there's no next projects planned for the collective.
And how was the festival circulation apart from Bildrausch? Because I think it played in BFI, and then maybe I'm mistaken somewhere else. But like for the filmmakers, how did they went through this process of interacting with the audiences or feedbacks? And yeah, I'm curious about how the film is traveling around the world.
We've had such a great journey with the film. So we started at CPH Docs in 24, and then, I mean, it's been to Sydney, Melbourne, DMZ, Camden in America, Docs Fortnight, loads of fantastic festivals, Ice Docs, and everybody in the kind of co-creation process has kind of taken it in turns to travel. It's just great. Audiences, I think, hopefully the film is a bit of a ride, a bit of a trip, and trying to do something a little bit fresh. I mean, I think any filmmaker wants to do that. And so, yeah, we've had really good audience response. We're very fortunate to have a cinema release in the UK. So we didn't think it would get this far. We thought we were making a much more niche experimental film, but it has seemingly connected with bigger audiences. And it's great to be here. It's literally finishing in the cinema any moment now. I'm about to do a Q&A.
So we come to an end. Thank you very much for being our guests at this Fabrica Live podcast from Film Explorer about the film The Stimming Pool. Thanks Stephen Eastwood, Öykü Sofuoglu and Noémie Baume, and to Olivier Legras, responsible for the technical part of our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to podcast series Fabrica.
Fabrica.
Stay tuned on Film Explorer.